Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, July 29th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris back from vacation. Eno, how's it going for you on this Monday?
I am not clean shaven. The house has got no food. We just walked in the door, so it was this you got me fresh, but it was amazing. Thanks to all the listeners and readers for their recommendations. We ate a lot of the food that they recommended. We really enjoyed ourselves. I put on the pounds a little bit, but we ended up in Anacortes, which is on the water, sort of north of Seattle, and we went crabbing and shrimping in the boat, and then ate our crab and shrimp at this 3-day long party at my friend's parents' house. So it was pretty cool. It was a really cool way to end it because we did Mount Rainier, and we did Olympic, and we did all the museums in Seattle. We did everything where we were like, we had an itinerary. We were like, tomorrow, and we're doing this, we're going here, we're driving here, we're doing this. And so the last 3 days were kind of just like chill, hanging out on an island and sitting in deck chairs and watching the sun go down. So that was great.
Hey, well, good timing because you came back and a lot of stuff happened. And
yeah,
the rundown
kind of keep track of that with the phone in my pocket, looking every once in a while.
Just as you cultivated some mass on vacation, the rundown cultivated some mass because Friday I was going to record with Vlad Sedler until my son flipped over a dining room chair while he was in it. He's 1.5. It was our first trip to urgent care for an injury. Fortunately, he was okay. Could have been much, much worse. It was a very scary situation for us on Friday. Ran out of time to record, rolled the show over. A lot of stuff to talk about today. So here we go. Jazz Chisholm is now a Yankee. He goes there in a 4-player deal. Our approach for today is to focus more on any major league players that moved and their shifts in value. We're going to do some Project Prospect later in the week to talk about some of these younger guys that are going to stay in the minors changing hands, right? So Jazz gets traded for 3 prospects, and he's going to play a couple of spots for the Yankees. Probably going to play center field, maybe a little bit of third base.
He's playing third base tonight.
Playing third tonight. Maybe a little second base, depending on what happens with Gleyber Torres. Torres has started to hit a bit more recently. We've seen some improvement from Jazz this year. Better strikeout rate, better walk rate, best zone contact percentage over the past 3 years, and he's still swinging as much as he ever has in the zone, so it's nice to see that. I did happen to notice, we don't talk about CSW a lot for hitters, but Jazz actually has improved in that regard, down to a 26.8% CSW. Usually he's above 30. So overall, this looks like some better decisions. By projection, hat tip to Joe Sheehan on this one. Jazz is now the 4th best hitter on the Yankees behind Judge, Soto, and Stanton by WRC+. So a nice get for sure. And the versatility plus the park factor change and the new position and the supporting cast point to pretty nice upticks in value fantasy-wise. And I think this also kind of ticks the box we talked about with Britt a few weeks ago when we were looking for possible Jazz Chisholm Jr. landing spots. He lands on a team where he's not the superstar anymore, or the lone superstar. And that seems like it's going to be a good thing for him. It's going to take some of the pressure off, but also like just boost up the stats because everything around him is so much better right now.
Yeah, you get that risk of going to a more loaded team that may not play you as much because they have better options at certain times. It's better to hit with runners on base. It just is. They can't defend you the same way. Your stats go up. I think it's also like you start getting sacrifice flies. And so your batting average stays up higher, right? Because they don't count it as an out if somebody was on third. Which is just such a baseball's rules are so weird. Like whenever anybody says your stat was made up, I'm like, yeah, okay.
We should rewrite the official scoring rules of baseball some offseason.
Yeah,
that might be a fun project.
Yeah, an out's an out unless there was somebody on third base. Then it's not an out. But anyway, what I think is interesting is that the Yankees are second to last in stolen bases. And sometimes that is a question of team philosophy, but it also can be a question of team age and who's on it. And what your personnel is. I guess you don't want Aaron Judge to hurt himself stealing bases. You don't want Juan Soto to hurt himself stealing bases. And you don't really have anybody other than Anthony Volpe that's kind of a young player coming up that's going to steal a lot of bases. I think with Jazz, you say, we are not paying you as much. You're not as big of a power threat as these other guys. I think what they're going to say is, we'd like you to run. We want to add that element to our game as a team. So if that's the case, that he's the fourth best projected player by WRC plus, and he adds an element of speed that they don't have anywhere else, I'm going to be comfortable in saying that he will play all of the time against righties. And I just don't know about lefties. The splits are kind of big, and in Miami, they were playing other people sometimes over him against lefties. I also don't know that, Oswaldo Cabrera, that even with the split penalty would project much better. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You project, Jazz Chisholm, as one does, to have a 117 WRC plus, a correct sort of adjusted split would be to maybe be around league average against lefties, right? Oswaldo Cabrera is not projected to be league average with the bat. And even if you gave him a good split, how much better could he be? So there's a chance he plays every day, I guess, is my long-winded way of saying that. And I think it'll be mostly actually at third base, because I think that's where they have the most trouble. So if he can go in there tonight and not have an error, I think LeMahieu's worse than Gleyber Torres. And LeMahieu can play first. And we may even see a Ben Rice demotion. I mean, he's around league average because he walks and hits for power. But if they, there could be an extra sort of an odd man out situation here. It's risky times for Gleyber Torres, DJ LeMahieu, and Ben Rice, because that's where I think Jazz Chisholm is going to ultimately put the most pressure on the playing time.
Right. And I'd probably, in terms of magnitude of risk, flip the order that you listed them in. Gleyber probably would be the safest of the bunch. Ben Rice would be the most likely to start losing some time because of the mixing and matching. But you're right about Oswaldo Cabrera. He hasn't hit lefties during his time in the big leagues so far. So if you say the solution is Jazz hits ninth against lefties and he moves up against righties, that's still probably a nice big win compared to just losing the time outright, because you'll see right-handed relievers later on in the game. Those will be fine, right? And I think the other thing with Jazz, we've seen more pull-happy approaches from him. I wonder how much he'll try to lean on that, especially at home,
that short porch,
with the short porch, right? So there's just a lot of things here that are a good fit for him.
And I think, I don't like saying it this way, but I think it sort of gets across what I think, which is, I think LeMahieu's kind of toast. I mean, it's rude. I'm just saying, the bat speed is gone, right? The top end max EVs are gone. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 mile an hour difference. The hard hit rate is the worst it's ever been. I just don't see, the ground ball rate is worse than it has been since his debut season. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's nothing to hold on to other than the fact he's still making contact. But if you make contact that softly, it's not good news. So I would say that he's got the most risk going for him right now.
So if that's the freshest of the big position players on the move that topped was Randy Arozarena getting traded to the Mariners. We're going to talk a lot about the Rays and what they've done collectively in the last couple of weeks.
It was kind of funny how that broke down, because we went to a game in Seattle, and the vibes around the Seattle lineup at that time were not good.
You went to a game and Julio was out with that ankle injury too. So I
went to the game, I think, after they found out that JP Crawford got hurt on Monday. I went to Tuesday's game. So they knew they were losing JP Crawford and Julio Rodriguez. They were both going on the IL, and they were really just everyone's like, how are we going to score runs? And then I watched a game where Logan Gilbert was pitching well for the first 4 or 5 innings. And I just felt like, dude, this guy thinks he has to throw a no-hitter tonight. Like that's how, and it was against the Angels. So I thought maybe he will throw a no-hitter. That'd be fun. And then they just kind of fell apart. They did some there was some poor defense involved, and then they just lost 5-1. And that one seemed like, they really had to get the bases loaded twice to get one run. And I was just like, oh, this is painful to watch. What's funny is I don't think that one player can change a team that much, but the Mariners have scored 6 runs in the last 2 or 3 games. You know what I mean? They put them in. I don't know what happened. Now they're a run scoring machine. I think Arozarena is a great addition to that lineup, and I think he's going to play every day. And the only thing that I worry about is a strikeout rate explosion with that batter's eye. The good news is that in 48 plate appearances before the trade, he'd struck out 25% of the time. His league strikeout rate is 25% of the time in that park Randy Arozarena had. So there's just the faintest bit of evidence that he can handle whatever that batter's eye situation is. And he's on a hot streak right now. I think he's my ongoing analysis of him is that he's a low ball hitter that has to figure something out regularly on pitches high in order to get pitchers to go back low. And that's when he gets white hot, is when he's hitting those low pitches, because that's what's happened this year. But in any case, great addition. I think back on the other side, what do you think is happening? I had some tepid bids in for Johnny DeLuca. Because I do think he's now kind of an everyday player. Maybe Richie Palacios counts too. But my problem was, in particular with those players, was just that I kind of needed power. And in this league where steals have been much easier to get this year, they kind of offer this kind of meh power, okay stolen bases, maybe not great batting average combo that I don't think will fill a lot of our listeners' needs.
Yeah, so I guess my thought on DeLuca is that we have at times seen him show good in-game power. He's been a little old for the level at a couple of his minor league stops. He popped, I think it was 17 homers in 57 games.
He's done the Paredes pull fly ball bit a little bit.
Yeah, he's got good strike zone judgment. I think the hardest thing for a player like Johnny DeLuca, because we talked about him during the offseason after the Glasnow trade, for a righty on a team like the Rays that mixes and matches, if you don't get an early shot to be a regular, you only have 2 starts a week plus at bats off the bench to try to carve out a larger role. So it just felt like he's never been able to get momentum in this organization. Now I think he's the big winner. I think of the players taking the place of departed players at the deadline, DeLuca might end up being the most interesting pickup of all. It's possible because he could be a 5-category player. It could work out that way. Since he has the approach similar to Paredes, similar enough to Paredes, you can say, yeah, the raw power might not be great, bad barrel rate, by hard hit rate, but he's going to do enough things right to give you more than you'd expect. That'll play. If the average doesn't hurt you and there's speed and everyday playing time, then I think you're talking about a guy that can make an impact, at least in 15-team leagues, probably down to 12-teamers where you start 5 outfielders, though, if this is, in fact, an everyday opportunity for him. So DeLuca gets the big up arrow. There's going to be other guys that end up getting to play more because I don't think the Rays are done as of 5 o'clock Eastern on Monday. They're going to clear out at least 1 or 2 more players.
Seems pretty obvious that Brandon Lowe will go.
I think so. I mean, they
unless they're just not, unless they're, unless people are just, it's too much money, which seems like a crazy thing to say because it's, I think, $10 million a year for Brandon Lowe.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal for a team that could be looking for some power. They got 2 prospects plus a player to be named later back in the Arozarena trade, by the way. Aiden Smith, Brody Hopkins, and a player to be named later of significance was the report I saw. And so that's kind of cool.
I think the other trade that they did that was so interesting was Christian Morel for Isaac Paredes, and we've talked a lot on this pod about Isaac Paredes and his pull approach. What's funny is that I think the reason this trade was even possible for the Rays is because Isaac Paredes plays a passable third. And that's funny to say because the Tigers were already playing Paredes at first a little bit. So they didn't think his defense was that great. But the Rays stuck, Paredes out at third, and he was better than Morel, who, we all knew that defense was a problem. I was a little surprised to see that Morel, I think, has been below replacement this year because his defense was so bad. Because there's so much I like about Morel's bat. So I'm guessing that this is a little bit, and if you think about it, there's a model here for the Rays. Yandy Diaz, Isaac Paredes, Christian Morel. Guys who had certain things they could do on offense that they'd kind of established they could do those things, who had a weak fit defensively on the teams they were on, right? Yandy Diaz was trying to play third base, whereas he migrated towards first base, but they played him at third for a little bit. Isaac Paredes trying to play third base, already moving to first. They play him at third. So if the model fits, are they just going to play Morel at third for the rest of the season, at least to see what they've got, and not even call Caminero up? Or are they going to call Caminero up and just install Morel as the DH and play him that way? I wonder what they'll do.
I think there's a few things they can try. I think the further away from playoff contention they potentially slide, the more they can even push it. They're still a low probability playoff team. It's not completely over for them, even though they are hard sellers right now. There's a lot going on here. So defensively, just quantifying the difference. Morel has been a -5 DRS player. Defensive run saved at third base so far. Paredes has been an even 0. By outs above average, Morel -12, Paredes +1. So that's a big difference right there for what the Cubs have on the field, right? You can play Paredes at third base, not feel bad about it. You can keep Michael Busch at first base. Everything's fine in your corners. What you've also changed a lot is the amount of swing and miss in your lineup, even with the improvements that Morel has made at the plate this year. He's got his K rate down to 24.5%. If you told me back in the winter, Christopher Morel is going to strike out less than 25% of the time, but he's going to be below the Mendoza line despite a double-digit barrel rate and a 44% hard hit rate, I would have been baffled by that. I would have thought the underlying numbers were good enough for Morel to do all the good things he's able to do, and the Cubs were just going to use him mostly as a DH, and that was going to be fine. So I think the defensive floor changes for the Cubs. The swing and miss goes down. I do think it's not just the fans that like Christopher Morel. He seems like a popular guy in that clubhouse. He seems like he was really well liked by his teammates. So they get a little bit of
Pete Armstrong said something about how
a little bit of a chemistry hit, right? But then Paredes comes in and produces and helps them beyond this season, which he's under club control for several years. So you're not just giving up on the season by making this trade if you're the Cubs, but you are making an interesting choice. Aside from the defense, you are choosing the guy that has an approach that a lot of people question. People say, okay, Isaac Paredes does this now. How long will it last? And if you asked a lot of people, what will age better? The Isaac Paredes pull happy power approach or Christopher Morel blistering the ball all over the ballpark? Who's going to be the better long-term player? I think people gravitate more towards what Christopher Morel does at the plate than what Isaac Paredes does at the plate, even though Paredes has been doing this now for 2+ years.
I mean, the other people that we've got on the Paredes list are kind of like Alex Bregman, and Marcus Semien.
Yep.
Marcus Semien did get a lot of money, so it's not like the market did not reward him. However, Semien also was an everyday player with more of a defensive value than Paredes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the market's going to value Bregman, and I'm going to be watching it closely. And Bregman's power has taken a drop off, and we've just seen this year a little bit of a drop off in Paredes' power. So I do think that there is some danger there, and Tampa in general likes to bet on hitting the ball hard. They like that. They don't even care so much about the launch angle. They just want you to hit the ball hard.
Right. And then try to tweak it more from there. I think it's interesting too. I was looking at Robert Orr's Seager metric. It's a swing decision metric. Morel is 4th among qualified hitters in Seager. And not every single player on that leaderboard pops and has a great year. It's interesting too. Nelson Velasquez is 6th on that list. The Cubs traded him away at the last deadline, and it hasn't worked out yet for him. But it's part of the why do you believe in this guy? Why do you like this guy? Good swing decisions certainly help.
Good swing decisions, great raw power, good game power. Really bad defense. And
but
somehow, I think some poor BABIP luck this year. I mean, a 24.5% strikeout rate for Christian Morel with, 111 max EV, 12% barrel rate. Like, this is a guy who should be hitting 250, I feel like.
Yeah. And if he just does that the rest of the way and keeps the K rate and walk rate close to where they are, he's going to have more like a 330, 340 OBP. And that's a heck of a lot more interesting than the guy that he's been up to this point. So I think they kind of got to buy low in here on Morel on top of the two pitchers they get, one of whom, Hunter Biggie, could end up in their bullpen like soon, tomorrow. It could be real quick for him. But I thought that was a really fascinating trade because, when Jed Hoyer came out and said they weren't really looking to upgrade for only this season, or they're looking more towards 2025, people took that as we don't care about this season. They probably misconstrued that because they also added Nate Pearson to the bullpen in a separate deal. And I'm curious what you think about the Cubs adding Pearson. Like, it's great.
I went
stuff.
And bought him.
I mean, there's a chance he could close because that's an open bullpen. They've had all sorts of problems in the late innings all year. We've talked about it at a few different points. I don't know if Pearson closes right away, but he could be closing next year if he's not closing by the end of this season.
He's had some issues turning this stuff into results. But sometimes it's a large BABIP. He's had that. Nate Pearson has. Sometimes it's large home run rate. But it's not that you look at his stuff and you say anything missing. I guess his location's not great. He's a little wild, and especially specifically with that big fastball that he's got. But he locates his sinker better. That he's thrown, very, very sparsely this year. What if they saw something where they kind of split him over to, or have more sinkers in there for strikes, or throw more sliders for strikes, or whatever it is, they have some sort of thing there. But he's much needed addition in terms of stuff to a bullpen that's really had no stuff. In terms of where he sits, there's Hunter Biggie, who's gone. Daniel Palencia, who is in AAA. And actually Pearson would slot in ahead of those guys, both of them. So he immediately just becomes the guy with the best stuff in that bullpen. And I'm going to bet on that because nobody has stepped forward and taken that job yet.
Yeah, so that's an opportunity for Nate Pearson moving on. We do know that the Jays also moved Yimi Garcia to the Mariners. They're probably not done flipping players, but that's a bullpen that's always really loaded. Garcia was getting some saves with the Blue Jays. Maybe he gets the occasional save with the Mariners. We've seen they mix and match a little bit. They don't use Andres Munoz as a straight up closer, but
Gregory Santos could get a save sometimes.
Yeah, so I like the addition as far as just getting a guy that's an impact guy in Seattle, and I'm glad that they're not punting on it. We talked about it on the live stream last week.
They're so weird. They're such weirdos. Oh my gosh. They trade Ryan Stanek away?
Yeah, they traded Ryan Stanek away in a separate trade.
And get Yimi Garcia. They trade Randy Arozarena, and then today, right before we went to pod, they traded for Justin Turner.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mostly a buying situation, but it's just funny that they find the opportunity to also sell.
Some of it comes down to roster management, which is going to be a part of our conversation at some point about the Rays. Like, they're going to have to figure out the 40-man eventually, and that's November probably, where it's more of a problem than now. But it's
and some of the trades that the Rays got though was they wanted players that were further away, for just that reason. But I think with the Mariners, sometimes I get the vibe that the financial situation is pretty tight. And so everything has to be the same value. And I think that actually explains a little bit of one of our other blockbuster trades, the St. Louis Cardinals trading for Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham, trading away Tommy Edman. The fact that they didn't go for a more frontline type postseason starter, or somebody like a Blake Snell, somebody with top end stuff, may have also had to do with some money. If you look at it, Tommy Edman's salary next year is $8 million. Eric Fetty's salary next year is $7.5 million. they managed to tread water and have as much money going out as coming in. And I think that might sometimes, there used to be a blog called IIATMS. It's about the money, stupid. And I was an avid reader of that back in the day. And, I think in this case, some of these trades, the way that they're going, the way that like Stanek goes out before Yumi comes in, the way that Edman goes out to pay for Fedde, there's you kind of tend not to think about it when there's only 2 months left and be like, oh, he's only got like a couple million left on that contract. Well, sometimes they've budgeted for whatever they're budgeted and they can't afford that 2 million or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when teams have to operate that way, but I think it almost forces a little extra action because they find a trade that works for them from a what they need perspective. Then they have to either involve a third team or make a subsequent deal to fix it on the back end. There's a lot in this trade that I actually like. I mean, I think everybody got something pretty good. I'm not sure we're going to know about the White Sox quality of return in the immediate future. I think people are going to
They also have to develop them.
Yeah, they have to develop these players. They have to have scouted them correctly. Like open questions, I think, for the most part on the two prospects. And there's also, this trade's weird because there's a player to be named later or cash going to the Cardinals from the Dodgers. There's a player to be named later or cash going from the Dodgers to the White Sox. There's a guy from the Cardinals, Oliver Gonzalez, who's pitched in the Dominican Summer League that, who knows, he could end up being one of the best players moved in the entire deal, even though it probably won't work out that way just because he's so far away. Anything can happen with a 17-year-old in the Dominican Summer League that gets included in a trade. But Tommy Edman, if he's healthy, fills a lot of potential holes for the Dodgers. So I do like that fit. It seems like he's finally started to make.
They may start him at
progress.
Shortstop, huh? Like, when he play a lot of shortstop.
I think he'll play a lot of shortstop. I think part of what makes Tommy Edman such a valuable real life player, especially, is like he's a good defender pretty much everywhere he plays. So he's not just the kind of guy that you put at shortstop who's two or three outs below average there or something and just gets by. Like, I think he's actually good at playing shortstop, or at least good enough to be an upgrade. So that's cool. And you get a guy that maybe for his career, he's been like a league average hitter, a 99 WRC plus. Maybe they can find something else there. They've done this before with guys in their late 20s, but I'm a little worried about Tommy Edman as a hitter coming off of a wrist injury that's taken him this long. That's the part I'm worried about. I think defensively, he fits in great for the Dodgers, but it's a little more of a wait and see for me with the bat.
Also, I think, and I'm trying to confirm this real quick, he'd been starting to lose some playing time against one of the hands. Yes, against righties, he was lower in the lineup and losing some starts over the course of his time with St. Louis. But he's landing with a new team, and the Dodgers have an incumbent righty playing short. I just get this feeling that they don't want to put Betts back at short.
I don't think they want to put Betts back at short at all. I mean,
the outs above average wasn't that kind of.
No, and I'm looking back. 2022, playing other positions also, but playing, I think he had over 600 innings at short. Tommy Edman was a plus 10 for outs above average at short.
Wow.
6 defensive runs saved. Last year, in just under 400 innings, he was 1 defensive run save, 4 outs above average. So that's better by far than what Mookie's done. We've talked about how impressive it is that Mookie was able to even play shortstop, having not really done it as a pro before, but this helps them. Tommy Edman helps them.
Yeah, they're buying him to play short.
Yeah.
They're buying him to play short because he could, if the wrist is all right, and there was a strained hamstring or like a strained ankle, like when he sprained his ankle, like stepping on a base wrong, and then there was the lingering soreness, but then there have been competing reports saying no, he's that the wrist is fine. They're going to look at the medicals, I guess, and if the trade goes through and they're happy with it, and Edman's wrist is fine, there's a non-zero chance he's the starting shortstop for the Dodgers the rest of the way. And Rojas and Ahmed are more, I don't know, maybe even Ahmed's off the roster because they're going to have to make room, right? Mm-hmm. And then Rojas is just your backup shortstop and backup, defensive third baseman. So That would be a really good outcome for him. This trade also includes, you said you really like Johnny LaLucas, one of the players that might benefit the most from trades. I'm going to set forth a possible one from this trade. Miguel Vargas, I think, will now land into full-time playing time on the Chicago White Sox. Get his first sort of, hey, kid, you got 2 months to figure it out, and show us what you got. I don't know where they'll play him. They did just bring up Baldwin.
Yeah, Brooks Baldwin.
Pham left. So you got Robert Benintendi and Sheets in the outfield. And you got Baldwin and Lopez at second. Did I see something at Makata's? Oh, God. Makata's. Minor League Rehab Summit was halted, and it was referred to anticipated soreness, which is just hilarious. If you think about it. Well, we knew it was Makata, so we just anticipated the soreness. So, yeah. Anyway, Vargas lands, I think, into a full-time job. I would guess second, third, or corner outfield. I've liked some of what Sheets has done this year, but he's just not turned it into power. It's somehow he's like cut the strikeouts and the swinging, and he's added the patience, and a lot of the plate skills look good, but he's not turning his max EVs into barrel rates. Mm-hmm. And the barrel rates are boring for Gavin Sheets to the point where it's not enough, especially for his defensive type. So if they want to give Miguel Vargas right field, I'm not going to complain. And if they want to give him third, that's fine with me too. So I think there's a lot of place for Vargas to end up. And I love he's got elite plate discipline, and I think we just need to wait a little bit longer before we say anything definitive about his power.
Yeah. I think the question with Vargas for the White Sox is, can you turn him into a good defender somewhere on the dirt? I'm not convinced based on what we've seen so far that it's going to work out, but they're in a position they can try just about anything. It doesn't matter if he's well below average so far. Try work with him. There was a point where Marcus Semien wasn't a good defender, and he became a very good one. So if they have the right coaches in place, they have the right plans in place, they can make Miguel Vargas a better player in that facet. But this is a clear runway for everyday playing time. So he's definitely among the deadline winners for sure. He had to change teams to do it. DeLuca just by subtraction kind of got to stay in place and play more. But I think you're right. I mean, the downside is, compared to what we always had hoped for, if Vargas was going to break in with the Dodgers, now he's doing it on a rebuilding team where, yeah, you get plus playing time, but you get below average supporting cast, especially if they're not done clearing guys out.
If it does come down to him versus Brooks Baldwin, I would point out that Vargas is running out of options. You have them both for a long time, but options are important because with Brooks, you could maybe, you have a couple more seasons where you can see him for a little bit and send him down. They can even send him down now and just give Vargas second if they want, because your number of options has almost as much to do with how you think of that player and how quickly you have to make a decision on what he does, right? They have one option year left on Miguel Vargas. That means there is a little bit of, we need to find your full-time spot. Mm-hmm. They have 3 with Brooks. So they've got time to figure out where his spot is.
Yeah. What do you think the Dodgers are doing with Michael Kopech? Is he set up? Is he the eventual closer? Do you think they unlock something that the White Sox haven't been able to up to this point?
Well, one thing I like about him versus somebody like an Evan Phillips is just that Kopech brings, a really high stuff fastball. And my working theory is that that's what people want from their closer. It's not a crazy theory. And he profiles, I think, really, really similarly to Tanner Scott in terms of really wild. And what's funny is in overall stuff, Tanner Scott 147, Michael Kopech 142, location plus Tanner Scott 94, Kopech 95. So I think that they profile really similarly. In fact, their fastballs both have a 151 stuff plus, Tanner Scott and Michael Kopech. So you just got everyone's sitting over here salivating over Tanner Scott, and you just got Tanner Scott as a throw-in. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you got your own Tanner Scott as a throw-in, and you don't have to be part of the 5-team scrum that they keep reporting. Oh, another team's interested in Tanner Scott. Good. Let them be. We just got our version. And in terms of like, what's the fix for me? It's not in front of me. Maybe it's a simplified arsenal. Maybe it's a simplified target system. Maybe it's just time, dude, because he has a 340 Sierra. Stuff plus says he should be better than this. I don't think he should. He's a true talent. 1.7 home runs per 9 for Kopech. So I think to some extent, this is just like, we're going to bring him somewhere out of that whole mess where he has the burden the burden of what has been. That's just a political reference. Sorry. He is burdened by what has been in Chicago, and he needed to be unburdened from that. So, the Dodgers like, hey, we love your stuff. We're not going to give you the 9th, I don't think, until, we start to see improved command. But if you do, the 9th is a possibility. Hudson's been getting saves for them.
I mean, Hudson could keep that job, could end up being an inexpensive addition from recent weeks that pays off down the stretch. There's a lot of ways the Dodgers bullpen could unfold. They could still add one more. But the key difference here, though, too, is that Tanner Scott, whoever gets him, is a rental. He's a free agent at the end of the season. Yeah. Michael Kopech is under control for one more year. So Dodgers likely have Kopech in a high leverage spot for next season as well. Now, the other side of this, the Cardinals getting Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham. Tommy Pham back to St. Louis? Who would have thought?
So weird.
It's weird.
I don't think he's super happy about that, but
I would love to get an official comment from Tommy about that, if possible. Maybe off the record we'd get one, but Eric Fetty to St. Louis, people say, the Cardinals have a type. I think Eric Fetty's a little better than some of the other recent Cardinals starting pitcher additions. I don't think he's quite as good as Sonny Gray, but I think he's more interesting. I think he's better than Kyle Gibson. He's probably better than this version of Lance Lynn. Like, if you're ranking the starters in that rotation or ordering them for elimination games in terms of how badly you'd want to put them out there, who you'd be most excited to have going for you, how would you rank them? How would you compare Fetty to the non-Sonny Gray options?
I'm going to push back just a little bit. And this is my listicle version of pushing back. Here is the entire list of qualified starters who do not have a better fastball than Eric Fetty. Jose Quintana, Austin Gomber, Patrick Corbin, Zach Littell, Griffin Canning, Brady Singer, and Miles Michaelis.
So it does fit the type a little bit.
Yeah. There's something I think still kind of cool about this. Like, he's kind of like against righties, he's a sinker sweeper guy, right? And then against lefties, he's a cutter change type. And, he can mix and match the other things in enough to keep people off balance. But he's, in some ways, he's got his bread and butter 2 pitches, Eric Fetty does, against lefties and against righties. And there is something to be said for arsenals that work. You know what I mean? That like, you have a pitch you can throw for strikes against lefties. And you have a pitch you can throw for strikes against righties. You have a pitcher you can throw for swinging strikes. You know what I mean? He does have those pieces, but 21% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate, it's pretty vanilla to me. So I don't know. Yes, he's probably the second best starter on the Cardinals. But, if we started the playoffs right now, he would be the worst second best starter in the playoffs.
I see maybe the possibility of Fetty either bringing back old pitches or maybe just having the feel and ability to develop more. So I think what you see in 2024 isn't necessarily what you see in 2025. He signed that kind of team-friendly deal coming back from the KBO.
It is good news. He adds a sweeper, and he made some actual movement changes to his pitches. So
yeah, I don't know. I kind of see a little more of like a Seth Lugo-y potential addition here. If he just keeps tweaking, there might be a little bit more there than meets the eye. And I'm with you on the stuff works together. That's important. I think that's something that Eric Fedde has been able to figure out during his time in the KBO, and clearly just a different pitcher than when we last saw him stateside. I think he's at least proven that, even if it's not the most exciting profile from like a roto perspective right now. So I think the Cardinals did pretty well to at least get a starting pitcher upgrade that's not simply a rental.
Yeah, and I think, one thing they probably, we're in the middle of this, and I probably shouldn't even say this because it's hype time and we shall be hyped about the trade deadline, but probably we overrate how much what you get at the trade deadline can help your team. Like there might be like kind of a mental capacity, like I'm talking about the Mariners scoring more runs as soon as they got a new bat in the lineup. There could be a mental thing to it, but in terms of like, could the Cardinals have made their starting rotation into a top half starting rotation in the playoffs in this trade deadline? Like, was it even possible? I don't think so.
Not without doing things to their system to go get Garrett Crochet. That would have probably had a
which is not how they've
massive,
worked in the past.
Like massive detrimental impact on them in the long run. Especially
not how they've worked in the past either.
If you trade for Crochet, you give up 3 or 4 very important long-term pieces to do it, and then Crochet breaks, then you've really double whammied, That's
a little bit, yeah. So I think, this is very Cardinals-like. And in the end, if they were going to do anything in the playoffs, it probably has to come out of the bats.
Yeah.
Because they've got the bats there, and the bats aren't performing like they used to. And so it comes down to like 2 or 3 veteran bats that need to be better. And if that happens, then they can make it with Fedde as their number 2, probably.
Simple would you rather? Would you rather have, if you're a Cardinals fan, or if you're in the position of just getting your team better in general, from fantasy perspective, would you rather have Zach Eflin for the rest of the season, who got traded to the Orioles, or Fedde, who ended up going to the Cardinals? Which was the better addition for this year and next year? I guess you can factor in cost if you want to, because Eflin has the final year of that 3-year deal he signed. It was backloaded, $18 million next year. So the Orioles get something they need for this year and next year, just as the Cardinals do. They're paying a little bit more just in terms of salary to get it, but who do you like better from a skills perspective at this point?
It's a good one. Our projections, using Stuff Plus and like aren't maybe not super helpful here because they probably still consider Zach Eflin in Tampa and Fedde in Chicago. Neither one of them has standout stuff. You're talking about one sort of out pitch in both cases, the sweeper for Fedde and the curve for Eflin.
They're pretty similar on paper.
They really are. Eflin still throws the 4-seam and actually has a bit of a wider mix right now. I'm gonna go with Eflin. He also has struck out more batters for longer. Maybe not this year, but has struck out more batters for longer in a bigger sample than Eric Fedde has.
I do think in many years, this ends up being the ceiling in terms of the quality of the starting pitcher that gets moved at the deadline. Maybe we'll see that someone else moves.
Unless they're a rental.
Yeah.
If they've got multiple years of control, this is about the best you can expect, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, well, okay, I locked in.
That's
some
why I don't
certainty
think
going into the offseason
is going to get traded because it's just too complicated.
I think you could trade Garrett Crochet in December, and that could be fun too, because then you're calling 29 other teams instead of 9 other teams. Like that.
And there's none of this like, will he even make it to October? It's more like he's yours from the beginning of the season. You can manage your innings as you like,
And he might tack on 2 more pretty healthy innings. They said at the end of last week they don't have a specific plan for Crochet. He's in that group that's going to let him keep working and see how it goes. But I thought the Eflin trade was fine. The Orioles got something they really needed to help stabilize, give them quality innings every 5th day. within that group, given all the injuries they've dealt with. What'd you think of this one? Carlos Estévez to the Phillies, who don't seem to be done, but they've been mixing and matching in that bullpen. Jose Alvarado, 13 saves on the year. Jeff Hoffman has 9. Soto's got a couple as well. The Angels get a couple of prospects back in the return. But do you think Carlos Estévez, from a fantasy perspective, just muddies up an already difficult closer situation in Philly, even though he makes that bullpen one arm better?
I mean, I even picked up a real cheap Jose Alvarado share the other day. He has 13 saves on the year. I don't know. I've been holding on to Jeff Hoffman in the main event and been playing him a lot, and he's rewarded us in terms of ERA and WHIP, but 9 saves, projected to finish the season with 15 saves is just a weird way to do things. not in terms of them winning games. I understand it. They're trying to find who's the best at what and find the best matchups for these pitchers and give them rest when they need it, because this is all about October for them. So they're all just trying to figure out how best to use this bullpen and not worry about who's the closer of the capital C. I get it. But for us on the outside, it's weird because it's really hard to project what's going on there. And I'm going to guess that Hoffman gets the most saves, but I think it's just a total guess because they're really good pitchers. They're all really good pitchers with a lot of stuff. And sometimes their command comes and goes, and that's it. I mean, I don't really have a bad word to say about the group of relievers that they have in St. Louis. In Philadelphia.
I love it. I love that they went from having a bullpen weakness a few years ago to a good.
Oh yeah,
where we can't even quite determine who exactly the preferred option for saves is, or they maybe just don't have one. Maybe their preferred option is.
They were doing so well that they took they took one of their best in terms of Stuff Plus. Sir Anthony Dominguez is second on the team in Stuff Plus, and traded him to get a better part-time corner outfielder in Austin Hayes.
Contenders helping contenders. Hayes for Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache going back the other way to the Orioles.
I have a little bit of a feeling that Austin Hayes could hit his way into a full-time gig.
It's a nice little Park Factors win for Austin Hayes, getting away from Mount Baltimore and into Philly.
Yeah, and I think he's a better hitter if you take the defensive component out than Rojas.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the floor is quite a bit safer.
He's a better hitter than Rojas. So if against, if most of the time, if your best offensive without not that big of a defensive hit is Hayes, Marsh, Castellanos, it is not great defense. But what you could do is start games with Hayes and replace him with Rojas once you get a lead. I don't know.
Yeah, that might be the script. Go glove late. Just get Hayes in there for the bat a little early some days, depending on the matchups. How about this one? Here's a Park Factors winner. Ty France goes to the Reds. I mean, Seattle to Cincinnati, as far as a right-handed hitter boosting homers, that's one of the best possible routes you can go via trade. It's the reverse Jesse Winker, who got traded from Cincinnati to Seattle a few years ago. Big time Park Factors winner. I think it's one of the few places Ty France could have landed where suddenly his fantasy appeal jumps back up to the point where he'll be targeted in weekly pickups on Sunday. He'll be a player people are excited to get if they're looking for some corner help.
What's the corresponding move? Noel Marte gets sent down?
Haven't seen them make a transaction.
Like what's his way? Yet. Yeah. What's his path?
Yeah, someone's going to lose playing time if they're going to play Ty France, right? So that's the question. What's the weakness right now?
After a steroid suspension and with the way that Marte has played, kind of think the writing on the wall, especially since the way Marte has played since even in the minors after his suspension.
Yeah, they could move Spencer Steer back into the outfield. He's been playing a lot of first base lately.
Yeah, you just put Jamer at third. You send Noel Marte down, and you play Ty France at first.
Yeah, and if you did that, you'd be playing less Will Benson? I think so. I think Will Benson probably loses time.
Yeah,
most likely, if they don't want to send Marte down. That's probably the way it works out. So I think there's a shot Ty France is useful in the final 2 months, which, hey, good for him. He put in the work this offseason. We'll see if it pays off a bit later than expected.
Do they have him after this year, Ty France?
Great question.
No. Free agent 2025 on Fangraphs means free agent at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the Reds buying.
We'll see if they do anything else or if this is just we tried.
Yeah, I think it's just a little thing to do at the end of the year.
The annual Bob Castellini, where else are you going to go? Waiting for that quote. Zero feel. None. No feel. No feel.
My gosh.
Here's a fun trade.
I'm going to check to see if we're missing anything as we're talking.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep an eye on it, but the fun trade of this deadline so far could be topped. It's fun because I didn't expect either of these players to be traded for each other or traded in a deal like this. Quinn Priester goes to the Red Sox. Nick Yorke goes to the Pirates. Both, I think, land in better spots to contribute. We've seen the Red Sox make some pretty massive adjustments to their pitching program. So they probably have a tweak or two in mind for Priester. And Yorke, both guys are former first rounders. Yorke has a clearer path to playing time. He's a little more blocked in Boston, starting to put the pieces together at AAA this year, showing some power, showing some speed. I'd like this. This could end up being a long-term win-win. I put it in the Discord a little earlier today. They're not quite at the same level as far as Logan O'Hoppe and Brandon Marsh a couple deadlines ago, but it feels kind of like that, where two teams could be pretty happy with the decision in the end because they helped each other out.
Yeah, I think Priester is really interesting because his sinker is actually an above average pitch for its type. It's hiding under a 98 stuff plus, but that's above average for a sinker. And then his slider is decent and his curveball is decent. So there is a foundation there, in the middle of all that. The location numbers, I heard some people sort of talking about Quinn Priester's command, but location numbers are above average. What really kind of tanks his whole profile is a really poor four-seamer, which he doesn't throw a ton, but I could see the Red Sox just saying, stop it. And a little bit like a Bayo or, a lot of their other guys have just, really reduced the amount of fastballs they've thrown. So, Quinn Priester could go in there, and I don't know, though. It's not obvious to me. This is not like a Luis L. Ortiz, thing where I'm like, ooh, if only, and I could see it. And then he finally did some stuff and I'm like, oh, actually I like him. This is more like, okay, you're going to throw the four seam that you throw 15% of the time. You're going to stop throwing that and you're going to maybe port it mostly over to sliders. So you're going to throw sinkers 30% of the time, sliders 35% of the time, curveballs 20% of the time. I don't know, dude. Like, how good can this be? The fastball velo isn't standout. The strikeout rate in the big leagues has never been standout. The strikeout rate in the minor leagues was not even really standout. I think they can maybe turn him into a usable starter and maybe, in the 4s ERA, but I'm not sure this is a big deal for fantasy. I don't know that I like a marginal pitcher in Boston is not something I'm like really reaching for. On the other hand, Nick Yorke going over, one problem that people have mentioned is that he's struggled against lefties. Nick Yorke has. If I'm acquiring him, I say I don't care about that yet. And how could he's a right-hander, so I don't care that he's struggling against lefties right now. You know what I mean? Like, if he's a right-hander who can hit righties, then he's probably an everyday starter. And what I like about Nick Yorke is he combines really good strikeout rates with really good walk rates. And it's just a question of how the power works out. But it's not, does he have zero power? It's more like, does he have average power or does he have slightly above average power? Both of those things are in play a little bit. Of course, the Pirates need a hitter, and of course they've had a little bit more success with pitchers. So I think this deal makes more sense to me from the Pirates side.
I think we're going to look back at it. We're going to say, oh, Quinn Priester is another Cutter Crawford type in Boston. They found a usable starting pitcher, and that has a lot of value. And you can do that for someone that maybe wasn't going to do a whole lot for you as an everyday guy. But I think Nick Yorke can be an everyday guy now that he's in the Pirates organization. I think that's a possibility, at least, that looked a little less likely before.
He could get called up. He could get called up as part of this deal. Definitely
could be up. So Jesse Winker get flipped to the Mets. That's pretty fun.
That's a park factor loss.
Yeah, that's a slight downgrade.
Maybe
Winker.
A stolen base loss too. Might be really bad for his fantasy value, actually.
He's been good over the course of the season, but I almost wonder if he'll become more of like a semi-regular.
Yeah,
the Mets being on a better team, if that chips away at his playing time a little bit.
I don't know what the most recent news is for Starling Marte and why it's taking so long. All the note I've got is he's hoping to begin a running progression, but if he does make it back, I'm not sure. Winker could even be someone who just plays until Marte's back and then is really, like, as you say, more of a part-time player.
Yeah. Nice to see him healthy again, though. It's been a rough couple of years for Jesse Winker between his stops in Seattle and Milwaukee. James Paxton, by the way, got sent back to the Red Sox. Red Sox have been doing stuff in the sense of, they've been active, but Paxton in a deal with the Dodgers after he gets DFA'd, plus Danny Jansen goes there, so they get another catcher. I think they're just doing the soft buy right now. We'll see if something changes in these next 24 hours, but it looks like minor moves trying to get a little better on the edges of the roster.
Yeah, I mean, depending on who you talk to, giving up Nick Yorke is a thing. So that, some people really value him. He was a first round pick, but he was one of the weirdest first round picks. We even brought it up in the Melissa Lockhart, episode that we did.
Yeah. People were surprised at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that one is a bigger deal for me. Paxton, would not start over Cooper Criswell, but Cooper Criswell doesn't throw hard either. Maybe they'll just mix and match there. They've now got Quinn Priester. So it's, three guys who could maybe start, maybe relieve, maybe give you innings, maybe they'll just figure their way out using those three guys. Maybe they're just taking the three worst pitchers on their team and replacing them with Paxton, Quinn Priester, and I'm forgetting who the third is now real quick. The other guy they got?
Jansen's catcher.
That's right, Jansen's catcher. Well, maybe they just replaced their worst two pitchers with Paxton and Priester, and not necessarily being like, you are a starting pitcher with a capital S. That seems possible on a team that's listening to Kyle Bodie as well. So, yeah, Dan Jansen's great. It's a great rental, but it's a rental, so it probably didn't cost them much. Paxton didn't cost them much, so. It just all sort of hinges on whether or not you think spending Nick Yorke was a good idea and how much you like Quinn Priester to call it anything more than would you call it the soft buy.
So prior to the weekend, AJ Puck gets flipped to Arizona for Deyvison de los Santos. Andrew Pintar also going to the Marlins in that one, outfield prospect. And in the time since then, Josh Bell has been put on waivers by the Marlins. So they're just trying to shed payroll, hoping someone will just say, sure, we'll take Josh Bell for nothing. But Deyvison de los Santos, for now, reporting to AAA. At one point, I think you heard a scout say that he's not a real baseball player. And
he doesn't know how to play baseball.
Because he's not a good defender anymore.
He can't play the field, yeah. Wait, so Deyvison de los Santos got moved somewhere?
He's in Miami now.
In the what trade?
AJ Puck trade.
And Puck ended up in Cleveland?
No, Puck's in Arizona.
Oh, that's right. Deyvison de los Santos was a Diamondback.
Yeah.
I thought he got
5 guy for Cleveland, sent back.
Oh, they sent him back.
Yeah.
Okay. That all makes sense.
So he's been crushing it in Amarillo and
I saw some discussions about whether or not Paul Sewell should be out as closer. So I guess Puck is an interesting guy for people to pick up who are looking for saves.
Puck's been great since moving back into the bullpen. Clearly that role suits him. He has the stuff to do it, and that's all great. Even if Sewell doesn't lose the job now, I do think the next time the job becomes available, they have one more high quality option in the mix. It's not Ginkel necessarily. Now it could be AJ Puck if they make a change. De Los Santos should get a chance to play in Miami that he may have never received in Arizona. I mean, I think the thing is, I know we've ragged on AAA quality of pitching a lot, but De Los Santos is doing what he's doing as a 21-year-old. He just turned 21 in June. So he's been young for the level, putting up some video game numbers. It's not great from a WRC plus perspective.
And they may need to, the Josh Bell thing may be the corresponding move for him, huh?
They may open it up for him. They had him go to Jacksonville, the AAA affiliate, to start. He's already homered once there in his first 2 games.
Nice.
He got 29 homers this year in, 89 games between AA and AAA. It's pretty exciting. I mean, if you're going to do the deep rebuild, and it looks like the Marlins are doing the deep rebuild.
Oh, this is hilarious.
Take a chance.
The prospects TLDR on Fangraphs, they have like a little, 1-sentence thing.
Mm-hmm.
The prospects TLDR on Deyvison De Los Santos is DDLS is a Michael Franco and Jake Berger clone with huge raw power that's undercoached by a rational and expansive approach. He's going to hit a lot of homers and have an OBP around 300. That's hilarious to have him on the same team as Mr. Jake Berger. In fact, they could be throwing balls to each other across that infield. Good chance.
Yeah, good chance they will be for a little while. So I do think De Los Santos gets a nice up arrow for PT because the D-backs didn't seem like they had any interest in really squeezing him onto their roster, at least down the stretch this year. And now he could just be an everyday guy for a rebuilding team. So that's kind of nice.
That's like curious. I mean, we'll do more of a prospects thing at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems to me like a really nice, like maybe one of the better prospects changing hands, coming into a better situation with more chance to play and being close, like kind of a relevant prospect move for fantasy players that, also wouldn't cost anything in terms of going to pick them up.
Yeah, should be relatively easy to get in a lot of places. Dylan Dingler is probably going to play more for the Tigers because they flipped Carson Kelly to the Rangers. I think that's kind of interesting only because Jake Rogers isn't necessarily a lock to just be the everyday or the primary catcher. That could be sort of an ongoing battle to watch down the stretch. Dingler's put up some nice numbers at Toledo this year, getting to his power a lot more often. 17 homers in 71 games, 20% K rate, 45% hard hit rate. So there's quite a bit to like there. If you look at some of Dingler's performances in the minors before, you see a guy that would get to a new level, struggle, and then repeat the level and figure it out. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bumpy adjustment phase for him these final couple of months, but he might learn enough and do enough to take over that job going into 2025.
Best new closer. I sent you, I was on vacation trying to make fab runs.
Oh, fab on vacation is about as bad as fab from the golf course.
Oh my God. That's right.
You hit me up yesterday like, hey, what do you think about this? And I was like, I'm in a cart riding down the fairway right now. Don't know.
Yeah. And so I'll just go to my screenshots here that I sent you so that I can see what I did. Maybe I made a mistake, but I had Pearson Hudson second, Fauché third, Tyler Ferguson fourth. Ferguson is the closer maybe for the A's right now. That whole deal, I don't know if you guys talked about it last week, was just sort of ridiculous. Mason Miller punching the training table because he didn't want to work out after a game.
He didn't want to lift or something, right? Yeah. So that happened. We learned about that after Thursday's stream when we talked about AL Rookie of the Year candidates and talked a lot about how Mason Miller as a reliever could win Rookie of the Year. He'd be the third A's reliever since Houston Street did it in 2005. It'd be Street, Bailey, and Mason Miller. Probably not going to happen now. As well,
my only problem with having Ferguson higher was Miller's going to come back. It was his non-throwing hand, so how long is that going to take? B, Urseg is there. Maybe Urseg gets moved, and then C, Oakland is not a great team making a lot of saves. So I just thought with those three things, I wanted them lower down. I put Roansy Contreras and David Robertson on the tree for really small numbers. Roansy Contreras got a save. Ben Joyce pitched 2 innings in an outing recently. but I have to think Ben Joyce gets the first stab at it, especially with the new sinker. I don't know. There's something. He has the gas of a closer. He looks like a closer. So, and I think he was one of the all pitcher draft? I don't know. In any case, I think as a GM, you want to have something you can point to and be like, at least we figured out Zach Neto and have a closer now. So I kind of think Ben Joyce is getting the first shot there. There's got to be other situations I haven't thought of. I guess. Oh yeah. What's going to happen in Chicago?
I mean, the Kopech replacement, or are you talking about the Cubs situation?
Well, Cubs, I picked Pearson as my winner. I could be wrong, but it's better to be wrong at like the $10 out of 1,000 level than to be wrong at the $150 level. So I made all these bids at sort of a 1% level where I was like, I'm paying $1 out of 100 to see if I'm right. But
Brebbia is going to get traded, so it's probably not Brebbia.
Yeah, and we did kind of put a little bit of a scarlet A on this, the avoid tag. Maybe Leisure comes up and gets a shot. Maybe Schuster gets a shot. It's not obvious. It's not obvious, and it may not be good news.
Yeah, I don't think I want to shop in that bin if I can help it. I'm probably just looking elsewhere because they're going to generate so few save chances. It will likely be an unreliable source anyway, even if they find someone with good enough skills to sort of hold that job temporarily for the final 2 months of the season.
Fauché does not necessarily have the fastball of a traditional closer, 96 on the sinker. But he's interesting in terms of swing strike, strikeout rate, and the fact that the team has him under team control for a while. I could see them giving Fauché a chance.
Yeah, I could see it. I think they have other relievers they could move too that would clear it out even more, right? Like beyond, like if they trade Chandler Scott and keep Andrew Nardi, then maybe it's Nardi instead. But they could move anybody in that bullpen. So maybe you want looking 2 or 3 chairs down to actually find the next closer in Miami. But they're also going to be in that putrid White Sox range, I think, for the final 2 months. Given how hard their sell has been. I mean, they're getting down. Nick Gordon was already playing a lot, but Nick Gordon, I think his playing time is even more stable now as a result of the trade that we talked about a little bit earlier, like just opening up more playing time for him because of Jazz being gone. He'll play a lot of center field. Brujan gets a little uptick in playing time there too. Man, a lot more to go. I think teams don't seem like they're done. I'm
gonna say that the Blue Jays only trade people that aren't under team contract for next year, and so not even Chad Green goes. So Chad Green is going to remain closer in Toronto, I believe.
Well, that's a pretty big win if you've got Chad Green and that ends up happening because it looked like there was a pretty good chance he could move at some point.
And there still is, obviously. But if you're the Blue Jays and you want to compete next year, it would be great to have Chad Green as a little bit of Romano insurance.
Yeah, it would be. We also, in the time since you and I last spoke and since our last episode, Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter against the Nats. That happened on top of all these moves. And there was this absurd catch. Xander Bogaerts playing keepy-uppy for Jackson Merrill to make a catch in the 5th inning. Little flare over the infield. That was the weird play, the bizarre play that every no-hitter has to have.
They do.
Yeah, so that was the second no-hitter in Padres history, of course.
Blake Snell, I saw through a 15 strikeout, 2-walk, 7-inning gem.
He looks like he's back.
Yeah, that might have sent him out of town, though.
Yeah, well, then the Giants swept the Rockies all over the weekend. Though, so.
They were like, why do we have to play the Rockies and make everyone talk about us in that way? But I will say, Farhan's contract situation, he wants wins. He doesn't want to sell. Mm-hmm. So they may try to do the buying and selling that some teams are trying to pull off, but he doesn't want to sell, and he wants to get a playoff berth and keep his job alive.
Yeah, that's why I think they could sneak in and make a move or two here. They've been pretty quiet up to this point, but getting a lot healthier. And Robbie Ray looked really good his first turn back off the IL last week too. Some bigger picture thoughts later in the week about the fantasy implications of starters coming off of the IL and being the big prizes in FAB as opposed to prospects. That was something I kind of stumbled into over the course of last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about it because we didn't have an episode on Friday. But we're going to go. Good news. We got a live stream on Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern on YouTube. So be sure to join us.
Right around the deadline.
Right around the deadline. 30 minutes before. We'll probably stay on for about 30 minutes after. Britt's going to join us from the ballpark right around 6 o'clock. So we'll get an update from her, from the scene. Always nice to get that. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Sarris. You can find me at VanRiper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels and join our Discord. The link is in the show description. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.